Lazus Rex. Please subscribe to this channel and do not forget to like it. Chapter 1. The Rain. They say that roads cannot be worn down by walking, thought Kotitaki. He thought to himself that whoever said this must have never been to Lazistan. The roads leading to Pokut were muddy from the rain. In these lands, it rained almost every day of the year. Rain brought abundance, and the people of these places lived in greenery all 4 seasons of the year. At the same time, this rain and mud were a source of great suffering for the enemy armies that came to conquer these places. Regular armies marched in a single line and acted with a single order. Thousands of soldiers would move on the same mud in harmony, and the mud, which would liquefy due to the pressure, would begin to slide, and the soil would slide on sloping places, swallowing many armies. Karazoa geography. Kotitaki spent his life as a poet. He would travel from one plateau of Lazistan to another, sing Laz folk songs, and tell the story of one village to another in exchange for food and sherbet. His ancestors were also poets like him. He knew by heart the stories his father and grandfather told him, which had been passed on for centuries. Some of these stories had songs, some had poems. He would add new experiences to these stories from every village, town, or megapolis he visited. Kotitaki always gave the news to the people wherever he went that the king of Pontus had a new child, the villages plundered by the Cappadocians, and the boats that sank in Karazoa. The tops of the Karazoga resembled twisted fabrics laid on top of each other. If he had chosen to walk along the roads between the hills on his way to Pokut village, the road could have taken days. Kotitaki was still young and vigorous, and with an effort he began to climb the hill in front of him. Green was springing up everywhere around him. In some places, tall cypresses and pines, and in others, dwarf hazel trees surrounded the area. The thorns of the hazelnut sometimes scratched his body, but he got used to the pain. He was laughing and saying to himself that my skin needed itching again. He never bothered himself with anything in life. He was a free spirit. He lived in a wonderful geography. He didn't have to carry anything other than his fiddle and a few belongings, which he carried in a waste bag, because he had nothing but them. He wasn't very built, he could be called skinny. This was actually protecting him. When you see a well-built man in front of you, you unintentionally startle. Koti, however, did not pose a threat to anyone in his current state. He got his blonde hair from his father and his blue eyes from his grandmother. He had very little beard, almost a thick beard, but his hair was thick. He liked to wear a colorful cloak when he went on the road. After all, he was a poet. He was different from others. He was a musician. He inherited his kemense from his great-uncle, but he learned to play it on his own as a child. Music was harmony for him. It was about harmonizing with nature. Once, when his fiddle fell into the stream, he seemed sad at first. Music was an indispensable passion for him. Then he thought to himself that kemenche was not a difficult musical instrument to make. He would choose the right tray, shape it through the intestines of a rabbit, and easily obtain his new fiddle. It would just take some time. The only thing in life that did not come back was time, but the passage of time did not upset Kotitaki. His father taught him the importance of living in the moment and spending quality time, enjoying the moment. He had learned through experience himself to be at peace with the passage of time, to live in harmony with what each second or period of life brought, and that the ghosts of the past and the dreams of the future should not spoil the joy of that moment. If he wanted, he could close his eyes and remember a memory from the past. Wasn't this time travel? Kotitaki thought, when a person has such power, why should he be sad about the passing of time? He had to climb at least 3 more hills to reach his goal. The sounds of water were coming from everywhere around him. These hills formed streams, rivers, and waterfalls. In some places there were waterfalls flowing like thin ropes, and in some places there were wide and dignified rivers. Sometimes Kotitaki could not even hear his own voice. where there was the sound of water. The echoing sound of water was spreading throughout the valley. The Laz people had been ruling these places for a long time. No matter who came, no matter what king came with his powerful armies, no matter how much they shouted and fought, the domination of the Laz covered the surroundings and continued like the sound of water. These lands belonged to the Laz, with their castles on the hills, temples carved in the caves, and bridges. He had spent 2 very unpleasant weeks in Lazuli before setting out for Potu. He was very dissatisfied with his time in Lazuli. The cattle in the barn they gave him to sleep in smelled very bad. This was a sign of illness. When he told the village healer, he mocked him and told him that he should tie a peg around his nose while sleeping with the animals. Kotitaki loved animals very much. He thought that they, like humans, were the reflection of the gods on earth. The village chief asked him to patrol at night. He wanted to tell stories, sing songs and epics to the villagers who finished their work and came to the village square. Even though he obeyed the chief's word, he still did the storytelling part. Each patrol would gather around the tower at dusk, when the night was drawing to a close. There was no patrolling only when it was dusk. There were 3 other patrols besides him that night. The fire burning at the top of the tower had diminished considerably. Koti began his story with fire. Fire is one of the 4 greatest powers in the world. We feel the power of the earth when the earth shakes. We understand the power of water when the waves in the sea swell and shake the boats like a walnut shell. We feel the power of air most strongly with fire. The wind blowing over a campfire burns the forests and plants on the plains to ashes in a short time. This story is the story of those who worship fire. There was a tribe that worshipped fire where the land of the Persians ended and the land of the Afghans began. This tribe had a fire on top of the mountains that they never extinguished. Fire gives you warmth if you get close, but if you get too close, it burns you and turns you to ashes, both good and evil in the fire. You can see. Anton, the taller patrolman, interrupted Kotitaki. What good can come from fire, Koti? Koti replied, fire is a method of purification. Let's say I wrote a letter criticizing the king of Trapezon and criticizing him. I made him count all the negative words that came to me. If I throw this letter into the fire, won't it burn to ashes? Maybe my thoughts about the king of Trapezon were wrong. I couldn't evaluate his management correctly. The destructive nature of fire can sometimes destroy a sin, sometimes a house that is about to collapse. Zarathustra knows whether what the fire burns is good or bad. Zoroaster is the name of the prophet of the fire worshippers. Before he became a prophet, he oppressed people a lot and sighed a lot. One day, while escaping from his enemies, Zarathustra climbs to the top of a high mountain. There is a storm overhead with blue lightning flashing. A lightning strike with a deafening sound burns a tree right in front of him. Zarathustra throws back some men. God speaks to him from inside the fire. "O Zarathustra, I am your father. I am your creator. I send a different prophet to each tribe I create. Don't think I'm perfect. If I were perfect, I would send everyone a single book, a single religion, and I would give everyone a strong mind so that they could understand it. A book determines the way of life. It determines the form of worship. It determines moral standards. It shapes a person's way of life. If I say you will marry only one woman, most people will obey. If I say you will marry 3 men, most women will comply. I determine from when to get up in the morning to what to eat. My aim here is to understand people. I'm trying to find out which program I give. People will be happier and more useful to the world. One day, I will definitely find the ideal formula. Now listen to me. Maybe the book I am going to give you right now, the program in it is ideal. I hope that way with every new book. Man is a very difficult creature to predict. Read this book I gave you. Read first. Know that the truth varies depending on where you look at it. A private fighting with you on a battlefield may think that you are very cruel and that killing your enemies by beheading them is brutality. However, another private in your ranks thinks that you are a heroic commander and that you saved them from their enemies. Good and bad depend on the angle you look at it. Only someone who can look at it from opposite angles can understand the whole thing. Anyone who sees this fire, in which you see my manifestation from afar, may see destruction. You are the birth of a new human race. Cannot you see? This time, Peter interrupts Koti. Are you now telling us that God is fire to us? Koti looks at the fire burning at the top of the tower and answers. Fire is a symbol. It is necessary to understand the properties of fire well. As God speaks to Zarathustra through the fire, one can only guess what this will bring and take away. The greatest feature of man is the free will within him. Even God doesn't know how he will act when he gives him a book. He gives a book of fire to a nation, and that book destroys and purifies all evil. If the same book is in the hands of another tribe, it becomes a destructive power. Zarathustra's tribe has been burning the fire on that hill, where God's appearance took place for thousands of years, and they do not allow it to go out. They surrounded it with stones and turned it into a temple. This religion, which sees opposing forces as a whole, became the first building block of inclusive thought. It led people to understand many issues that religions, which previously divided events into good and bad, could not explain. Thus, said Zarathustra, those who follow in the footsteps of Zarathustra and do not let the fire go out have been among us for thousands of years. The first lights of the day began to appear through the mountains. Koti stood up once again with the joy of achieving his goal. A word activates a thought. One thought makes a person do many things. His aim was to spread words and ideas. Koktitaki carefully put his fiddle into his bag and left Lazuli like this. His mind was on sick animals, but there wasn't much he could do.